Bobby Floyd, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good considering the situation that we're all in right now.
Yeah.
But I'm staying positive. I'm getting a lot of things done around the house, and I'm practicing a lot, trying to be creative and keep the music alive.
Yeah, that's great.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, these interviews, we haven't talked really much about uh, the virus itself, and um, and some of what's going on in the world right now. Been focused more on um, how people that I respect, like yourself, are are using the time, like in how did we, how in your career did you get to where you are now? And I think that information, I think, is positive, and I think with the kind of career that you've had and the uh, level of musicianship that you have, I think will be inspirational to
Okay.
everybody.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, so with that in mind, can you tell us about yourself and where you're from and where you grew up and what your childhood was like?
Okay. Wow. I'm from Marion, Ohio. Uh, I I started playing at a very young age. Marion, there's not a whole lot to do in Marion. So you get into one thing and it's easy to stick with it because there's not a whole lot going on where you go out and places to go, concerts to hear. So I practiced a lot growing up, and that's pretty much how I developed my playing. I mean, I went the academic route. I took lessons, I studied, and I played a lot in church and played a lot around town. So that's how I got started. I stayed in Marion up until after high school. Right after high school, I moved here and I attended the Ohio State University for a couple of years. I didn't graduate. I went for a couple of years, uh, met a lot of musicians, started playing around town, and I've pretty much been doing that ever since. Along with not just playing around town, but traveling also quite a bit, quite extensively. But music has been my life, and it's. I started playing when I was 2 years old, and I'm 65 now. I don't mind telling people my age. Uh, I'm 65 now, so I've been playing for 63 years, believe it or not. Man, that sounds like a long time.
Um, so, can you talk to us about? Um, did you play in school? Did you play in school band? Did you have a particular teacher uh, that was particularly influential and kind of steered you in a particular direction?
All of the above. All of the above. I played in school a lot. I had my own trio in the ninth grade, starting in the ninth grade. And we played around town, believe it or not, in some of the nightclubs. There were a couple places in Marion to go to. Um, Bob Bryhop was the drummer. Bob Bryhop, as you know, is the drummer with Columbus Jazz Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
He's from Marion, and both uh, we both graduated at the same time, went to the same school, so we played together in the trio. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got started. I'm talking too much. I can't even remember the question you asked me. You said
Well, I mean,
practice.
yeah, were there teachers in particular that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I had some good teachers. There was a guy, older man, named Dick Coleman. So he was a great pianist. He's no longer with us, but he kind of started me off. I love the way he played. He was so hip in the way he played chords and his jazz approach. And believe it or not, he lived in Little Marion, Ohio. I also had a teacher that was from Columbus. I think he was from Columbus. He spent a lot of time here in Columbus, but in his later years moved to Marion. And he was a great jazz pianist. So he would sit me down at the piano and show me all the hip voicings to playing. just standard songs, and I was thrilled. Along with that, I grew up playing in church, and that has a lot to do with my development, the way I play now. Church was a big thing, gospel music, and I still do that now. Uh, so yeah, I had teachers. I played in school bands. I played around town a lot. So that had a lot to do with where I am today.
Now, since you started so young, and it seems like music was such a big part of your life, it seems like music chose you.
I believe it did. I believe it's a God-given gift. I believe God gave me the gift. And I have this belief that anybody that is able to find what their gift is should make that their career, because it's probably predetermined by somebody up there, uh, on what you should really be doing in life. And I feel like I was lucky enough to find that out. Music is my life, and I'm very confident at doing it. I've been doing it all my life. I haven't done anything else. I mean, I've had a couple of jobs while growing up, regular jobs, but music has pretty much been my life. So yeah, I think it comes from above.
Now, so Bobby, you have perfect pitch.
Hmm.
When did you? When were you aware that you had perfect pitch? When were you aware that there was something unusual about the way that you were able to perceive pitch from other musicians?
I remember I had to be under 5 years old because it was when we lived in our first house. And I remember the experiences I had. We moved from our house at the age of 6. So I was under 5 years old. And my sister and I, we would have these contests where she would go to the piano. They'd send me in the dining room. She'd go to the piano and hit a note. And I was able to come back out and hit that note the first try. You know,
Mm,
Before that little game between me and my sister, perfect pitch to me was so normal, so natural. I thought everybody had it, just like we talk, just like we hear, just like we, see. I thought it
right,
was just another sense,
right.
of the five or six senses. Um, but when I guess I could say I actually discovered it when my sister couldn't get the note right. But every time I go out and come back in, sit at the piano, I would hit it right away. And then I found out that other people didn't have it. So my father put me into music lessons, and that's when the music teacher, well, he has this thing what you call perfect pitch. So that's when I discovered it. So I was under 5, and that's how I found out about it.
Yeah, I've had uh, students. I've had a couple students that had perfect pitch,
Hmm.
and when I asked them about when they discovered it, uh, much of the time it's much later that people discover that they have perfect pitch.
Uh-huh.
But I think the combination of how early you started, and maybe some, yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure. So I don't have perfect pitch,
Uh-huh.
you know, and I know different things that I do and have done to be able to pick out things sort of through either a process of elimination or educated guess, or
Uh-huh.
obviously, like, I can hear, and I can hear well, but it's all based on relative pitch. So
Right.
it's uh, so you don't, when you're thinking about pitch, since you're able to pick the pitches out, developing any sort of relative pitch has not been something that was necessary for you,
No, no, since I had perfect pitch, I mean, it's already there.
right?
So I didn't, like, even when I was in school, I don't know if they still have sight singing and dictation classes.
Oh yeah, yeah,
They still have that.
yeah.
I you know I probably, what do you call it when you shouldn't even be in the class, where they just, okay, you're okay, you don't need to take this. There's a name.
Right, right,
Right,
right.
there's a
You,
name for that. Well,
yeah, I think it's EM. You can EM
yeah,
out of a course.
right, right.
Right,
And I didn't do it, but I should have. I just sat in class and got everything right, you know.
right, right.
Um, so yeah, yeah, it was just so natural. I didn't have to spend time developing that. You know, there are
It's,
other things that I ended up working on, you know, throughout my growing, you know, but
uh,
not my pitch.
so sitting at it, so you know, one of the things that you hear all the time about people that have perfect pitch is if they sit down at a detuned piano, that would bother them. So, like for instance, if I tuned a piano up a major third or something,
Right.
would that bother you?
Yes, it would. And I did experience that growing up. Actually, and I hate telling you this because you're such a great saxophone player, but I tried to play saxophone while I was growing up. I played alto. I started out on alto, you know, E flat. Um,
I knew there was a reason that I liked you. I couldn't put my finger on it,
well, I
but
never told you because I'm even ashamed to bring it up in your presence.
oh,
But
come on.
but uh, but yeah, I played alto, and I learned how to get around, you know, play the scales and play a couple of notes. It's totally ear, you know, I use my ear. And then I picked up the tenor and tried to play the same. And every time I play an E flat, it's a minor third difference, right?
Hmm.
You know, I would go to the finger position to play, I think would be C, right? You know, just because I'm hearing, you know, the note, you know, and what it should be. So I would go to that finger position of that note on tenor and would be the wrong note. You know, so I had the same problem on piano too. If it was way out, if it was like maybe a quarter of a half step off, I could deal with that. But like you said, if it's like a third off, I would go to the key that I'm hearing, and my fingers would automatically go to that position of the key
Hmm.
that I'm hearing it in. You kind of understand what I'm talking about?
No, yeah, I do. I
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
So, like I said, I don't have perfect pitch,
Hmm.
but I have something that I call. I've developed something I call true pitch, and
Okay.
so what that is uh, so if someone is playing saxophone, flute, or clarinet, and I've started to be able to do this with trumpet in particular,
Uh-huh.
and I'm varying degrees of proficient with stringed instruments. So basically, the instruments that I play and the
Uh-huh.
ones that I've played the longest, I've developed this better. But if a saxophone player is playing, I can tell you every note that they're playing, and
Okay.
it's not relative. It's I just know what the notes are.
Uh-huh.
But I know the notes are because um, the timbre is different. There's
Oh, okay.
intonation, you know, characteristics. The instrument,
Right.
certain
Hmm.
notes sound more open, some more closed.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and so and I rely on that pretty heavily when I'm in the moment and playing. So it
Uh-huh.
will actually mess me up if I'm playing alto
Hmm.
and say, you know, and
Oh.
there's a tenor player,
Hmm.
and so I know the notes that they're playing. I know
Hmm.
what they're fingering, and so
Right.
when I'm okay, all right, I'm going to play this on alto. I actually have to do some transposing before I can
Right.
get
Wow. I've
to the
never
note.
heard that before. That's great. But you know,
Uh,
I guess everybody has their, you know, some people associate pitch with colors. They see
mm.
colors. You probably heard of that, right? And that's how
Yeah,
they
yes,
develop their good ears. You know, I,
yeah. It's
yeah.
interesting. There's something called synesthesia,
Hmm.
and synesthesia is when, and it's not uniform, and if you had 1,000 people that had synesthesia, the way that they would experience it would be completely and totally different. It wouldn't be
Hmm.
based on whatever the pitch was, but
Hmm.
some people see like an amorphous blob in front of their face as they hear a
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Some people, based on pitch, it will be different colors that they can see,
Right. Yeah.
and all of that. So uh, uh, there's that, and then I think that probably more like what you were referring to is there's a lot of terminology that we use colors often
Hmm.
when
Right.
we think about different keys. Do you experience a different key as in a different color, or is it
No, it's not. It
okay?
has nothing to do with being visual. It's all ear with me.
Hmm.
And it's just like you know us talking right now. I can tell if you're talking in a low voice or a
Hmm.
high voice. It's that distinctive with me when it comes to pitches. You know.
But a particular key doesn't um, isn't inherently more soulful to you, or um, more bluesy or something.
And you're talking about just the key and not the chord the key is related to?
Yeah, so like so, because they people talk about like D major as a bright key, or D minor or A minor or something
Oh,
as a
so
darker key,
right.
that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Do you relate to keys that way at all?
Oh yeah, yes, I do that. Oh yeah. You know, of course minor sounds sad.
Right, right, right,
Uh,
right.
dominant sounds bluesy. Major chords sound happy. And I do feel that. Is that what you're talking about? Or
It's yeah, it's sort of what I'm talking
yeah.
about, but there's even like, I mean, they've done these. Uh, so part of where there's an artifact.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're sort of experiencing an artifact of things that happened earlier, because it
Uh-huh.
used to be that um, B flat major and A sharp major weren't actually the same key.
Right. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Because the placement of the notes, and
Mm-hmm.
so literally certain chords were either unusable or were quite a bit more dissonant. But when we
Okay.
went to the well-tempered, uh, you know, tuning system, it sort of obliterated all of that. So now all of the keys are usable, equally
Mm-hmm.
usable,
Right.
and but I think sometimes what happens is string players in particular,
Mm-hmm.
which are sort of remembering the way that things sounded, or there's like this oral memory, there's like this
Mm-hmm.
collective memory or something, and they're
Mm-hmm.
tapping into that, and so some keys they tend to play, uh, uh, certain notes will be more sharp or more flat.
Uh-huh.
And then of course you have the thing where like, uh, if some people prefer to think of G flat major over F sharp major, and
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, and uh, and then that whole thing about like if you grow up in church,
Of
in black
course, yeah.
church,
Mm-hmm.
is D flat, E flat, all of these kind, A flat, all the time,
Mm-hmm.
all of these kind of keys. But if I grew up in like an evangelical church,
Uh-huh.
where it's more guitar driven, then it would be more like E major and A
Right.
major and F,
Uh-huh.
yeah, like that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, that topic is fascinating. I think this is something that eventually I'd like to have some kind of forum on, and have some folks that have perfect pitch, other people that don't,
Uh-huh.
and just kind of converse, because I think there's a lot that's not really totally understood about how different people perceive sound.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I remember hearing that there are actually people walking around with perfect pitch that aren't musicians, that's never touched up an instrument in their life, but
Right.
they have it, you know.
It seems to
I,
me like like someone that made like uh, a clock,
hmm
like a watch, like a watchmaker that was making everything handmade. It seems like something like perfect
uh-huh.
pitch would be particularly useful, because they'd be able to
hmm
hear the pitch exactly how something's resonating and vibrating, and they'd know
Right.
immediately if it's just right.
Right,
Um,
right. Yeah. And I've been trying to, I just don't, I haven't had enough patience, but just when it comes to like recognizing frequencies, not pitches, but frequencies on the whole frequency scale, I can do that if I would, sit down and take time. I'm talking about like, how many hertz,
oh yeah,
uh,
yeah.
in a certain area or a certain note, or if you're getting feedback on a microphone, you can tell the sound man,
Oh
you know,
right, right, right,
well
right.
that's 4K right there. It's actually the pitch, it's the note. But I haven't taken, I'm 65 years old. I haven't learned how to do that. I can do some of them, but I haven't learned how to do that. But it's very interesting having perfect pitch. And another thing is, the older I get, my pitch is not as perfect as it used to be.
Hmm.
Uh, it's actually a little flat. I think it just has to do with your senses, your ability to, just like in everything else, you just kind of slow down, you know. But my pitch is not as sharp as it used to be. It's not even perfect pitch. I mean, it's better than just relative pitch. I still know the area of the tone that the key is, and I'm usually like between half steps when it comes to recognizing the note. Like, like if you would play a C, if I don't think about it, I might tell you it's a B, you know.
Hmm.
Uh, and 20 years ago, I could just tell you and be right offhand without having to think about it. So,
Hmm.
I kind of find that interesting too.
So Bobby, what projects have you worked on, and what bands have you played in, and which were your favorites and why?
Okay. I tell you what, my favorite, of course, is working with my own band, my trio.
Hmm.
Um, and other trios that I've worked with in the past. And I'm saying they're my favorites is because, of course, I get to choose pretty much what I want to do. Along with their input. I'm not a dictator, but
Hmm.
that has been my uh, one of my favorite uh, things to do when it comes to playing with bands is just play with my own band.
Yeah.
Of course, I played with some great people. I played with along with you. I played in the Count Basie Orchestra, and that was a lot. That was a lot of fun. Back in the mid '80s, I traveled with Ray Charles. I traveled the world with him for about a year and a half, and I just loved working behind him. That was a great experience, a great learning experience, a great soulful experience. I also worked with Dr. John. I work in the Columbus Jazz Orchestra. I love doing everything that I do. And the cool thing about um, playing jazz and being a piano player, um, a jazz pianist, is you have the chance of playing in a variety of environments with big bands. You can play trio, you can play solo. Uh, so I mean, there's a lot of different experiences that I've had playing music, and that kind of keeps things interesting. So yeah, I've had a good life. Yeah.
So speaking of some bands that you've played in,
Hmm.
um, so so I was born in Columbus.
Uh-huh.
My parents met in Columbus.
Hmm.
Um, my dad was born in Columbus, and so I have family, extended family, and everything in Columbus.
Hmm.
So when I was 5 years old, my dad's job moved us to Michigan, and so
Right.
I grew up in Michigan and did all my education there and everything.
Uh-huh.
And um, I applied for a job at uh, at Ohio State, and I
Hmm.
got the job. And one of the things my dad, who was a great saxophone player,
Right. Uh-huh.
um, uh, one of the things that he was constantly doing, he was always talking about you. It's, oh man, and it would be great if you got a chance to play with Bobby Floyd, you know,
Okay. Hmm.
because he played in a band with you.
Right.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
uh, and so uh, as fortune and fate would have it, um, I think the first time I got to play with you, I think you called me to play at one of your jam sessions. I was the guest artist at one of your sessions, and
Right. Uh-huh.
I can't remember the name of the spot, um, but this would have been in '04 or '05,
Okay. Hmm. Hmm.
and
Yeah.
then of course I was so taken by your playing that I knew that I wanted to try to find some other ways to play with you and to play with you
Uh-huh.
more often. And so when the mayor, it was Michael Coleman at the time, when the
Uh-huh.
mayor was doing a Black History Month uh, uh, program,
Hmm.
um, they hired me to put a program together, and I
Right.
hired your trio to
Hmm.
back up most of the artists. And
Right. I remember that.
yeah, yeah, and we
Hmm.
played together. It's actually on my YouTube channel. That whole
Oh wow! I'll check it out.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was it was a it was a fun program to put on, and
Yeah.
I basically what I did was I just found the greatest musicians I could find
Uh-huh.
that happened to also be good friends and colleagues and things, and put that program together. So I think that was
Right.
the so I think the first time was at one of your sessions,
Hmm.
and then the second or third time was
Right.
for that Black History Month thing,
Yeah,
and
I
then since
remember
then,
that.
yeah, and then
Hmm.
since then we've played together dozens of times,
That's one and
um,
all. Right. Right.
most of the time with the CJO, and you've
DJO.
also
Exactly.
yeah, and then you've also called me several times to play
Hmm.
for your jam session, um,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
so one thing that strikes me about your playing is, uh, I mean, you were a terrific technician, but you're so soulful. Like
Uh-huh.
everything, I mean, every note has a pound of soul in it. Or something.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't matter how many notes you're playing. Each
Uh-huh.
note uh, is uh, is just completely full of that. Um,
Uh-huh.
can you talk a little bit about? I mean, you've said a little bit about coming up in church and things, and how you think that
Hmm.
that has influenced and affected that. But
Right.
can you talk a little bit more about that though?
Yeah, well, like you said, and you just mentioned the fact that it comes from church, and when you grow up playing in the kind of churches that I grew up playing in, it's almost like you're obligated to be soulful, and that's what they need as the spirit moves throughout the service.
Mhm.
Um, and if you're not providing that, they get somebody else to play organ, play piano, you know. And I played in church all of my young life, so I had a lot of years of playing in church. And from doing that, I learned how to, like I said, accommodate the spirit. And in turn, that results in moving people
Mhm.
uh, in church. And so you learn that technique, and that's where a lot of these soulful singers, African American soulful singers,
Mhm.
some of the best musicians and singers in the world are people that grew up in church.
Yeah.
You learn how, what to play, how to play to move people.
Yeah.
So you use that same technique. Even if you play classical music, you can use that same technique. I'm not talking about soulful. I'm just talking about the timbre in
Mhm.
how you play, your approach, your touch, everything
Yeah.
about the way you play. What moves people.
Mhm.
Uh, Even when I went to Ohio State and I started taking my piano lessons, I was good at interpreting, Bach, Beethoven, uh, and all the artists that all of the writers and composers that I played. I was very good at doing that because I was very expressive,
Yeah.
and that moved I remember my jurors, they were also impressed with the way I played uh, uh, that music. I give all the credit to playing in church, and of course, you playing in church, I give all the credit to God for giving me the gift to do that.
Yeah, there's this. Well, first of all, everything, all popular music, jazz, blues, everything comes
Uh
out of
huh.
the early black church.
Right.
I
Uh
mean,
huh.
it all comes out of that, and
Hmm.
it's unfortunate that there seems to still be uh, some lingering resistance uh, about reconnecting these different styles of music back together where they came
Hmm.
from.
Right.
Um, but I think it's totally true that um, there's an aesthetic that is missing if a singer
Hmm.
in particular has not come out of the church,
Uh
or
huh.
had or been influenced by those that did come out of the church.
Right.
there's a big hole. There's just something, and you might not be able to put your finger on it, but
Uh-huh.
there's just there's something missing, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that, yeah, I agree with you. I feel the same way. I feel exactly the same way. And I think it's because, we both, well, I don't know if you grew up in a church environment,
yeah, I
but
did.
okay, so us growing up in that kind of environment, when somebody gets up and saying that hasn't experienced what we experienced growing up, we're
Mhm.
going to feel that way. And I think that's what that a lot of that is about. But the interesting thing is, like you also said that, even some people that didn't grow up in church, but they spent a lot of their growing listening to, African American artists that like Aretha Franklin,
Right.
Marvin Gaye, that was real soulful in the way that they sang. Uh, so it can be acquired. You don't have to like really grow up in that environment in a church. But if you listen a lot, and that's what we both tell young people a lot. If you listen to music a lot, it's going to be easier for you to develop the style that you want. Especially if you're listening to somebody that plays in the style of the way you want to play. You
Mhm.
know, so yeah. Mhm.
So, you were talking about, you know, some opportunities that you've had to play with the Basie Band and Ray Charles and Dr. John and things. Um, could you share maybe your most, or maybe a couple of the most amazing moments that you've experienced in music?
Oh wow. Hmm. There are several amazing moments that I've experienced. And I don't know what you're talking about when you say amazing. Amazing related to what? Like the musically amazing, the way you feel, the way you make people feel when you play for them, or
Well, I mean, it could be things that were like pivotal moments. It could be maybe a particular opportunity that you're particularly proud of. You know,
okay. Um, just playing with the people that I've played with. I take pride in being able to do that. And even at the age of 65, I look forward to doing it even more. And I guess I could consider that some of my highlights in my musical life. Um, but I mean, there are times like when I'm playing like at a small club on Main Street, and there's hardly nobody in the audience, but you know, Derek, Reggie, and I, we're just like really vibing, and the music is feeling good, and everybody's at their best. To me, that's equal to all the other moments that I'm talking about. I mean, we're all so into our music and the way we present it. If we're able to reach that place that we're trying to get to, that is that's paradise. That's heaven
Right.
to us. So to me, those situations, those times when we're able to do that are some amazing moments for me.
So, speaking of moments that are worthy of documentation,
Hmm.
uh, one thing I always noticed about you, Bobby, is you always record yourself.
Uh-huh.
Like you have a recorder, and um, you're always recording. And
Hmm.
something that you mentioned earlier in our conversation was that you practice a lot.
Yes.
So,
Uh-huh.
so my, as I've gotten older and there's more sort of more responsibility I have, I have less time to actually practice. When I was in college, and in high school, I had a lot of time to practice, right?
Right.
So
Uh-huh.
so now I don't have as much time to practice, and so I have to be very choosy about you know what I practice, and because all of us have limited time.
Right. Uh-huh.
And my question to you uh, is, what do you practice? Um, I don't practice the same things that I used to. Every once in a while, if I'm feeling like there's some rudiments or something I need to go back to because something just doesn't feel
Mm-hmm.
right, I'll do that. But
Right. Uh-huh.
I don't necessarily practice the same things. And I feel like I'm a different player now, so the kinds of things that I'm going to work on now, are going to be different things than I would work on. So I'm always curious about great players like yourself. What are you practicing now? What are the kind of things that you're interested in? What sort of drives you to practice? In yeah.
Um, well, first of all, I don't practice as much as I should. When I was younger, of course, like you said, when you had more time, you know, you had more time to practice. But yeah, I'm not practicing as much as I should. But I do practice when I can, and I practice everything from like you said, rudiments to just different approaches. I'm a very soulful player, so I listen to a lot of like the younger modern jazz piano players, just to kind of pick up on what they're doing. I don't play a lot of that stuff, but I want to be able to play it if the situation calls for it. So I listen to a lot of the young players, just to pick up on that. And like I said, I practice rudiments. I also spend a lot of time when I'm not practicing. I listen a lot, and I tell young people this a lot. Um, um, I put headphones on while I'm mowing the lawn or washing dishes, or and I listen and I try to apply what I'm listening to the way I play. If I hear something that I like, and I'll make sure that I'm able to get to that artist again. I listen to the radio a lot, so if I hear an artist, man, that really sounds good. I look them up, and I'll go ahead and download his album or the particular song that I like, and I'll try to pick up on what he's playing, or his technique, or his approach. You know, so yeah, there are a lot of different ways of practicing. Like I said, I tell young people a lot. You don't have to sit at the piano or sit at your instrument to practice. Listen as much as you can. That is a form of practicing. So I do that. I do that a lot. Uh, yeah, and I practice everything from. I still listen to a lot of gospel. I try to practice playing gospel music. Approach that music keyboard players, piano players use today for playing gospel music is so different from the way it was 30, 40 years ago when I was growing up playing in church. It's totally different. Everybody's playing more abstract now, more modern. It wasn't that way when I was coming up. You just played one, four, and five chords. You pretty much stuck with
Mm.
that. Uh, so there's a lot of area that I'd like to get into when it comes to playing gospel music. So yeah, I'm always, and it seems like the more I practice, the more there is to learn. So it's an ongoing goal of mine. It's just to get better.
Someone that's accomplished what you've had in your career,
Hmm.
it's a, it is, how do I want to say, um, it's amazing that you still have such a passion to practice, to improve, to listen, to incorporate other styles of music into what it is that you're doing. Younger
Hmm.
players, you said. Um, uh, what where you think that comes from, as far as uh, you I mean you all the stuff that you've done.
Hmm.
It still seems like you're. I mean, because I hear you warm up. We show up to a gig, and
Mm-hmm.
you're always playing some stuff that I
Mm-hmm.
haven't heard you play,
Right.
as you're warming
Mm-hmm.
up, you know,
Right.
and
Uh-huh.
uh, I don't, that's not the common thing. A lot of
Right.
players, they get to a certain place and it's like, well, I can do the stuff I need to be able to do. I
Uh-huh.
don't really need any more than this. I'm just going to
Right.
just do this.
Uh-huh.
What makes you want to keep pressing like that?
Well, yeah, well, like I just said, the more I learn and the more I practice, the more I find out that there is to learn.
Hmm.
And I think just as long as I keep that attitude, I'll keep wanting to get better. There's always somebody out there. I don't care how good you get, but there's always somebody out there that's doing something not necessarily better than you, but different from what you do.
Hmm.
And that's one thing that keeps me inspired. If I hear somebody play something that I really like that I haven't played before, I want to go for it. I want to learn how to play it. So that's one thing that keeps me going. The more I practice, the more I learn, the more you find out, man, there are more doors to open. You know how it is. You might learn a lick, that you heard somebody play, but then you find out after you learn that lick, it takes you somewhere else that other person that you learned it from didn't even do. So
Oh
it
yeah,
opens up,
yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
yeah.
And it opens up other doors for you to step into and just uh, get into a totally different thing. So yeah, it keeps me going. Just the fact that there's just so much out there to learn.
So you talked a little bit about folks that you've played with and some opportunities you've had, uh, some teachers that you've had. So I have a question about uh, artists that, in particular, have been influential or inspirational to your style of playing. Now,
Uh-huh.
you talked about at this point you're looking at younger players and things, but
Hmm.
especially in like your formation, your formative years, what players were you uh, were you focused on, or in particular were influential in your playing?
Um, most of all the great players that we know as jazz musicians, and of course for me that would be piano players. And my first biggest influence in jazz was Earl Garner, and that was pretty much because he was my dad's favorite, and my dad listened to him, religiously every day. He played Earl Garner records,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and just me being in that environment, I fell in love with the way he played, and even at a very young age, I tried to mimic his style. Um, but at the same time, and then sort of later on, as I was growing up, my dad was also playing all the other great, everybody from Andre Previn to Thelonious Monk to all the great organ players, Jimmy Smith and McGriff and Earl Grant and um, all of the great organ players. I listened to organ players, so that had a lot to do with my development also. Uh, and not only, of course, like I said, I grew up playing in church, so I listened to a lot of gospel artists. Everybody from Billy Preston on organ to Twinkie Clark. There's a movie out about the Clark sisters right now. It's very interesting. I had personal experiences with them growing up in the Church of God in Christ. But Twinkie Clark was a great organist. We were about the same age growing up, and we even played in church sometimes together. Um, and then I listened to like there were organ players that played with Santana back in the '70s. That style, kind of like the rock, like Buddy Miles, the organ players. I like Lee Michaels was one organ player that I listened to. Uh, so and then in the '70s, I grew up listening. I loved the horn bands in the '70s: Earth, Wind and Fire,
Mm-hmm.
the Average White Band, Tower Power, Kool and the Gang, Larry Graham. Graham Central Station. Uh, that had a lot to do with my development because I loved that music. I listen to some Motown, and I tell young people this all the time. You don't have to strictly listen to jazz. Listen to everything. Like I said, it had a lot to do. I used to take like bass lines from Larry Graham and play those bass lines in church on organ on Sunday mornings. You know, get the people moving and dancing. It had a lot to do with the way I play now. You know, and I think every musician, every aspiring musician should just keep that in mind. Listen to good creative music. That's what it's all about. Good creative, not this music where you push a button and it's a loop, and you're not learning anything, and it's not really. I mean, there's some of that music that's creative also,
Yeah.
but try to get into learning how to play, how to really play. Um, but yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I'm listening to all these influences.
Mhm.
Um, one thing that's also unusual about you, Bobby, is uh, you're. I mean, you're a world class uh, piano player and a world class organist, and that ain't that ain't the usual thing. I mean, it's usually that one is not nearly as developed, and you're just. I mean, you're just so great on both instruments. How do you compartmentalize that, or do you even compartmentalize that? How do you approach one versus the other? Obviously, a grand piano has a different kind of action than a B3 organ has. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I've been playing so long, I've gotten so used to going back and forth between the two over the years to where, you know, uh, I adjust. It's kind of easy to adjust to moving from one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
But 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 there's usually some, getting used to. I just played a gig last week at the mansion on piano. Ever since I've been playing at the mansion, I've been there for a year, over a year now. I've been playing organ on this gig all the time. I've been playing organ mostly all of my gigs. But David Strauss, the owner, asked me to play piano, so we brought the piano trio in and played. I had a little bit of a problem adjusting to the piano. And so it usually takes me a minute, like maybe a couple times of playing the piano after playing organ for a while to adjust, just get, and the things that you have to get used to, of course, organs aren't touch sensitive like pianos, and for those of you out there that don't understand, the harder you play a piano, the louder it is. Well, it's not that way with organ. The louder you want the organ to play, you have to use your volume pedal with your right foot. So that's one thing you have to get used to. You're dealing with a couple manuals. On piano, you're just dealing with one manual, and then you have your footwork. Your bass pedals and the volume pedal. Uh, but like I said, I've gotten used to going back and forth between the two to where I'm not totally lost when I get on the other.
Do you find yourself sort of channeling different influences? I mean, and again, you started so young that you probably are doing some of these things, and you may not even be aware that you're doing them. But are you consciously aware, at least, of sort of channeling different influences, or do you just have a certain feel that's just different, just from touching the other instrument?
Um, yeah, I find myself channeling, but it's not a thing that I'm choosing to do.
Mm.
In other words, I might notice it after it starts happening. You know, my goal is to sound like Bobby Floyd when I play. But
Mm.
there a lot of times when I play piano. I go into that Earl Garner, that stride, that feel that he plays with, because I grew up. I mean, it was just such a big part of my life, and I don't try to avoid it. Um, but yeah, but my goal is to just to let it happen, and all of the practicing, all of the technique that I've learned, all of the lines and the feel. I want to bring that out. I want to bring me out when I play. And there's no telling. You might hear a little bit of Billy Preston. You might hear a little bit of our Earl Garner. All these people that had big influences on my way of playing. It's there, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's just there. So yeah, uh, um, it comes out, but I try to make sure it's all me in the way it comes out.
Yeah, I mean, from the first notes I've ever heard you play, you sound like Bobby Floyd, and
Hmm.
there's not any particular thing that I hear you play that I'm like, oh yeah, that's this particular artist, or that's this particular person. I mean, I can go back and I can trace certain influences if I look close enough,
Right.
but um, uh, but it's not something that I'm consciously aware of when I listen to you. I mean, it just sounds like
Mhm.
you, um,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
you've been very very influential on my playing and on my writing. Um,
Hmm.
uh, Very often, not just very often, every time we play together, I
Hmm.
record,
Okay. Okay. Hmm.
and I go back and I listen. I mean, especially when
Hmm.
you do those solo piano things or organ, where you're taking a hymn or something and you're playing it, you know, 100 different ways. you
Uh-huh.
know,
Hmm.
like when often you're featured with the CJO,
Hmm.
and often you'll have some kind of extended piano feature thing, and
Right.
that stuff is solid gold.
Uh-huh.
That just from a an arranger's perspective, from a playing perspective, and just all the different ways that you um, uh, twist and turn and adjust and
Hmm.
modulate and in unusual ways that you get to different things. It's very motivating to me. It's very
Thank you.
influential to me, and I try to channel that. That's something I am aware of, is that I am
Okay.
trying to channel Bobby Floyd.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
And I do that a lot of times. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks, Sean. And like I said, that's a great compliment coming from you. Because I feel so strongly about the way you play. Uh, uh, so yeah, I'm honored, for you to just say that. But yeah, that's what I do. And like I said, it comes from all the different artists that I listen to, all packed into one musician. And it all comes out. And I'm thrilled that Byron Strickland, the director of the CJO, gives me the opportunity to do that every now and then. I love doing it. I appreciate it.
well, Byron is a wise man to feature that way.
Mhm.
um, so, uh, so, uh, so, how do you see yourself in the future? What goals do you have? You have some unfinished projects, maybe you want to plug, or some ongoing things that you're working on, and maybe even some things that are not related to music, maybe personal growth. We're all kind of quarantined, and
Right.
so maybe this is an opportunity to look inwardly and make some adjustments and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's interesting you brought that up. That's kind of what I've been doing over the past couple of weeks. Just like you said, we're all quarantined, and there's not a whole lot to do. Uh, but it's a good time to look at inner self, look into inner self, and just try to get better in all areas. I've been reading the Bible more. I think this is a good time to. Somebody actually, it was Barney Rooker. I hope he doesn't get mad at me. But we were talking about this virus that's going around, and we were talking about, well, what do you think is going to happen? And he actually told me, man, I think this is going to result in a spiritual awakening. And
Hmm.
I said that's interesting that he brought that up. But it stuck with me, and I kind of see us going towards that direction, and I don't want to get too deep,
Hmm.
but so I think it's just a good time to like improve, to better yourself in all areas. So so I've been trying to do that just in general, and of course musically. So I'm practicing a lot more right now because I have the time too. So I'm practicing a lot. I'm trying to write. I'm getting stuff done around the house. Uh, and it's very interesting. This is one thing I brought up to my wife just recently. Musicians that I stay in touch with, they're practicing right now. Everybody's practicing, man. And I want to tell all of the people that come out and support us, all of the fans, all of our friends that come out, after this thing is over and you come out and hear us play, you're going to hear some great music.
Yeah.
You're probably going to hear some great music. We are practicing, we're writing, we're being creative. We're almost forced to. And it kind of reminds me of, well, I'm not reminded because I wasn't back around in the days of the Depression, the 20s, the Roaring 20s. But
Hmm.
there was a lot of creativity in music. There were a lot of great songs written. People were depressed. They were poor. There are a lot of songs. There's a lot of creative um, things that happened back in that day, and I kind of think that's what's going on right now. Musicians are being creative. You're going to find musicians writing songs related to what we're going through right now, like they did during the Depression. You know, so yeah, when it comes to talking about my goals, that's what I'm doing now. I want to get out and play. I want to play. That's my goal right now. Uh, but I'm working. I'm putting a studio in my basement, a real studio. So I want to start recording as much as I can. And I want to record more. I haven't recorded enough throughout my life. So I want to get as much as I can out, so that I can share my gift with people. Um, and like I said, I'm practicing, just trying to get better.
Is there anything else that you want to mention?
Hmm. I think Sean Wallace is one of the greatest, baddest saxophone players in the world.
Oh my goodness! Thank you, man. Thank you. I'll pay you later. See, I'm paying you under the table right now. See, under the
I'll
table.
receive it. Right.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, God bless you, Bobby.
All right.
I pray that you and your family will stay safe through this, and I pray for our country. I pray for our world.
Of
Uh,
course. Right. Right. All right.
all right.
Well, yeah, we'll see. We'll see you all after all this is over. Like I said, we've been practicing. We're ready. So come on out. You're going to hear some music that you've never heard before on a different level. So we all look forward to getting back together.
Until then.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
I'll see you.
All right.